Hi, my name's John Blichmann, and this is Doug Granlund, and we're here to talk to you today about some of the improvements we've made to the BrewEasy Classic.
Yeah, the BrewEasy is still growing strong, and some of the big improvements that we've made to the BrewEasy is adding a surface kettle to it and more capacity. Over the years, we've had a lot of great feedback on the BrewEasy system. What are the changes that are coming to the BrewEasy now?
The changes are pretty significant on this one. Mainly, the Boilermaker surface is being added, which simplifies the system and really makes it easy to clean. The heating element is underneath, bonded to the bottom of the kettle, so it really is completely out of the way. With immersion heaters, and whenever you're stirring and trying to whirlpool, you're hitting that element. It's much easier to clean, and with the low watt density, it's just a quick rinse with a faucet and wipe it clean and you're good to go. The other thing we've done based on customer feedback is increase the grain capacity and also the water capacity, so you can brew big beers on this system without having to have a separate sparge vessel. There'll be plenty of water and plenty of grain capability for you. You know, instead of a basket, we have a separate kettle. And since the basket isn't sitting inside of the one kettle, you end up with a lot more capacity for grain and you end up with a lot more capacity for water. And that's important if you want to brew big beers like barley wines and not have to sparge afterwards, which kind of, defeats the point of a no sparge type system. The extra tank gives you that extra water capacity, so you really don't need to add water, add top-up water, sparge, any of that. It just makes it a lot more straightforward for brewing big beers. If you eliminate the sparge step, which is still done in commercial breweries, it basically drops 45 minutes to an hour off of your brew day, since you really don't have to do that step. So you can just let it drain quickly and bring it up to a boil and get going. So I was a very traditional horizontal and also vertical three-tier type brewer for many years, and when we developed the BrewEasy and started using it, one thing was very important to me was just not sacrifice the wort quality and wort clarity. So I'm not bringing chunks of husks and grain and starches into the boil. And since the BrewEasy has the mash tun that's identical to the mash tun of a 3-vessel system, you still get that great wort clarity and wort quality on the system. The difference between the wort quality on the BrewEasy and the 3-vessel is very minimal. The only thing to keep in mind with a no sparge system is, since you are leaving a little bit of sugar still in the grain bed, you just need a little bit more grain to compensate for that.
And I assume that would be true in the BrewEasy or any of the all-in-one systems.
Yeah, BrewEasy all-in-one, brew in a bag, all of those, you're going to leave some sugars in there. So they're, and each system is going to be a little, slightly different in efficiency. The big key is knowing what your efficiency is so that you can just compensate for it.
Right, exactly.
The other thing I like is there's no lifting of the grain basket or the grain or a grain bag. The mash tun just sits on top of the main boil kettle. So you just let it drain after you're done mashing and scoop the grain out and carry the kettle over. And since it's a traditional Blichmann Boilermaker kettle, it's a lot less mess than a dripping bag or grain basket. It's a very small footprint, and the kettles stack on top of each other, so it really is, the 5-gallon system's probably 16 inches by 16 inches, and you can tuck it away in a closet or in the corner of your garage, and then it's just ready to reuse. There's very little setup time involved with it. Let's start with the 3 main pieces, or 4 main pieces if you include the pump, of the BrewEasy system. So we've got our Boilermaker surface kettle here, and this will become our boil kettle, and it's also what we use to heat the strike water, etc. So the next item that goes on is our adapter lid, and essentially this supports the mash tun and gives us a way to put the wort down in there. So we just put that on there, get it centered, and then the next item is our Boilermaker kettle, that's the mash tun. And we'll have a false bottom in it, and we have our AutoSparge that I talked about a little bit earlier. And this is going to maintain the liquid level in the kettle and make sure that it doesn't overflow. So we just take that, set it up there. And then this is that flow orifice that we were talking about. So I'm going to select the 3/4 gallon a minute. We have recommendations in the manual as to which one to start with. And I just put that in there. And this is the tube that's then going to allow the top kettle to drain into the bottom kettle. And I do really like these cool touch quick connector fittings. I'm going to orient center this a little bit more. There we go, just because I'm OCD and everything has to be perfectly centered. So this is the main system. Then we've got our pump that's going to draw wort from the bottom of the boil kettle up through the pump. And then we're going to connect that up to our AutoSparge. And that's where the wort or strike water is going to enter the mash tun. So that's, really the system. So the wort's coming out, going up to the top. The level, it will never overflow. The level is maintained by the AutoSparge, and then the orifice determines the flow rate. So I always get the same flow rate, so you never really have to worry about stuck mashes and that kind of thing. And we can talk about some of that a little bit later. And then this will become your boil kettle. So then at the very end of the mash, all you'll do is turn the pump off and let the wort just drain into the boil kettle. So we have our hot liquor in the boil kettle. In this case, I've got 9 gallons in there that I need for the batch. So I'm going to pump the amount of strike water that I want up to the upper kettle. There's a couple ways to do that. You can heat it all this way, or what you can do is heat while you're pumping and set your level in here. It's just a matter of preference how you like to do it. In this case, all we have to do is turn the pump on. Doug?
One of the things I like to do, I typically brew in my garage. So during the cold months, it's nice to do the recirculation like John talked about. So all my equipment's heated up before I go in with the grain. If you're brewing inside, that's not quite as important, but when it's cold out, that equipment needs to be heated up before you put your water in there. It's going to suck the temperature out if you pump it up there and put the grain in. So it's nice to have it warmed. I like to have it warmed up before I get started.
Yep. We also get the question, how much water do I have in the upper kettle versus the lower kettle? And the answer is roughly about half. It's really not that important. You just have, make sure you have enough that you can cover your grain with a couple inches of water, and that you have enough water in there for the grain absorption.
Yeah, all the water's going through the grain all the time, so it's not extremely important to have a ratio, but I like to have a minimum of 2 inches of water above, and that helps as the water's flowing through to give us a water surface above the grain for it to move, so it helps avoid the channeling through the grain much better if you have a little bit more water on top.
And that'll help with your efficiency, and we'll show you later on, but I will actually stir the top third of the mash every 10 or 15 minutes just to break up any channels if there are any.
And that also helps the flow through the grain bed, also improves efficiency a little bit more.
And we spent a lot of time simplifying the design to make it just really approachable, particularly for people who have not all grain brewed before. And we actually have a flow control orifice. And we have a selection of different sizes depending on what flow rate, and each flow rate stamped through there. So the way the wort travels through this system is it comes from the mash tun and drains down into the brew kettle, and then back out of the brew kettle and pumped up to the top. So it's just a continual recirculation. Well, the flow rate is set by the diameter of this hole in the orifice. And here's the return tube that comes from the mash tun, and then it goes into the brew kettle. And you just insert that orifice in there, and that sets your flow. There's really nothing to adjust. We do have a AutoSparge that sets the level inside of your mash tun. And that's real handy because I remember many a time when I was brewing 3-vessel, overflowing the mash tun or running the hot liquor tank dry and different things like that when you're trying to recirculate. And this really takes everything out of it. With the more simple all-in-one systems, you just kind of set it by eye, and that's pretty much all you can do with those systems. You just have to kind of pinch the flow off to get it about where you think you want. So one of the things I like to do is make a mark. I just use a Sharpie on the stainless. It wipes right off, and you can use a little paper clip or a piece of tape, a number of different things. But I'll just put a little mark there, and then I know if as I'm going through the mash, I'm going to watch the level in the level gauge, and it will drop just a little bit, and it'll continue to drop because your mash is going to start compressing just a little bit, and that sets the filter bed, and that's how we get this super clear wort, is having that mash bed act as a filter. So one thing that you don't want to do is draw too fast to where you're getting much past halfway between the mark you just made and down about right here. If you get much past a half, you're just drawing too fast. Pretty normal is an inch or two below the mark that you put there. So that's just a little tip for you so you can monitor what's going on with your mash. And that's one of the nice features about the level gauge in a mash tun, other than just the easy ability to read the levels in each of your vessels, which is very important when you're using the brewing software and calculating efficiencies, etc.
One of the biggest problems I see is people try to improve their efficiencies by crushing the grain finer, but at some point you go too far, and then you end up with stuck mashes. And if you're having a consistent problem sticking mashes, you probably need to look at your grain crush and open that grain crush back up a little bit until you get a nice flow through there. You shouldn't be sticking mashes in this system.
Yeah, my philosophy on efficiency, the only important thing about efficiency is knowing what it is. Now, if you're down at 40% efficiency, you've probably got some water chemistry issues or things like that. But with every system I've ever used, if you're somewhere between 60-65% and 80-85%, you're just fine. The important thing is knowing what it is so that you can predict it in your brewing software. We also have people that claim they're at 95 and 97% efficiency, and generally that means their measuring equipment is off. And I've not even pro breweries get up to that kind of efficiencies.
Yeah, and that's really important. Is once you figure out what that efficiency is part of the process of being consistent. And if you know what your efficiency is going to be, that's what you shoot for time and time again. After every recipe you do is trying to maintain that efficiency. The system is at.
So we've waited our 10 minutes or so, and I'm just going to open that valve up, and that's going to let water drain from the mash tun down into the boil kettle.
And then back up through the pump and through the AutoSparge.
So I like to start with, as we're going to grain in, just pull the float ball and the return tube, and I just lay it over the side of the kettle. And then grain in is pretty straightforward. Now with here, I don't try to dump the entire thing in all at once. That way I can get everything wetted and don't have to worry about dough balls so much. Make sure you've got a crush where you're not pulverizing the grain, that you leave the husks intact as much as possible. And you want mostly grits, a little bit of flour, and then the husks intact. With brew in a bag setups, so typically crush it a lot finer because you have a real fine mesh bag and you're not doing the wort clarification step like you would with a traditional mash tun. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wait about 10 minutes for all the air and everything to come out. And I'm also going to close the valve on the mash tun because I don't want to recirculate at this point. I want to make sure that the grain is all wetted, that any air that's entrapped in the grain is out of there, and that will make sure that wort flows through there real easily. And then I can take my AutoSparge, move that forward and down. And then that's going to maintain that fluid level right at that spot, about halfway, about in the middle of the ball. And then I take the float, and the float's job is to distribute the wort very evenly and not just blast it in the top. And for people that are real, concerned about hot side aeration, this is a great way to avoid that if that is a concern of yours, because it just gently returns that wort to the top. So now we've got that 10 minutes passed. So I'm just going to open this valve, and again, it doesn't matter how far you open it. And that the water is going to begin draining. And so we're going to turn the pump on.
One of the questions I get a lot is people think their AutoSparge is leaking, and you can see the liquid coming out of the back here, and that is by design. This feature is in there so that little grain particles that come through don't get lodged in the cylinder in there and lock the cylinder up. When you see the liquid coming out of it, that's very normal and nothing to worry about. The other thing too is sometimes when you turn the pump on, there may be some air in the system, and it will cause the ball to start bouncing here. And if you see that in your system where the ball is bouncing a little bit, all you have to do is reach in there and put your finger on it and stop it from bouncing and lift off, and you'll be fine.
As I was saying, every 10 to 15 minutes, I like to rake the top third of the mash. I don't want to go dig deep down in. And that'll break up any possible channels that I'm seeing. And you might even notice a little dough ball if you've not gotten rid of those earlier. And if you notice I just hit that, it's kind of bouncing a little bit. I just touch that with the thing and it settles it right down.
So when we developed this, it was really the idea of space storage for when people were brewing that didn't have space to store a 3-tier system or a big system, that they could put this in their closet, and that was the idea of it. With all the quality equipment we're using, basically the same as a 3-tier.
Which is why both you and I have been brewing on this system for what, 10 years now?
Exactly.
Taking wort samples during the mash is super easy. I'll just take this, set it neatly on the edge of the kettle. And then you just lift the recirc tube and take a gravity sample. And then if you notice, the wort is just crystal clear. There's no sediment, grain bits, husk bits. So you're going to avoid any tannic flavors that you may pick up from having that in your boil. We've confirmed that our mash is complete with the specific gravity. And now we're really into the draining standpoint. Now this is where you would normally lift the basket of a typical all-in-one system. And in this case, all we have to do is turn the pump off. I'll close the valve down here. And then we just leave that on. And now all the wort is draining into the boil kettle. And while that's draining, I'm going to turn the system on to boil. And I can pick a profile and then hit start. And I'll change this up to, I was at 75% while I was recirculating. And I'm going to go up to 100%. And now we're bringing it to a boil. So I'm just going to wait for this to drain, and I can keep an eye on the level gauge. Now on a 3-vessel system, I would start pumping hot liquor over to the top of this tank and then into the boil kettle. And I'd have to wait till there was plenty of wort inside that boil kettle on a 3-vessel system to make sure everything was covered, especially an electric system, to get the boil started. And that's another nice feature with the Surface. You don't have a minimum level really. If you have an inch or two of wort in the bottom, you can turn that boil, the heating element on and start heating that wort, so that'll save you even more time than an immersion element, which is going to sit up higher and you have to make sure that's covered. So we've got everything drained, we're heating up. So what I'm going to do is remove the AutoSparge here. And we're just going to loosen this nut and remove the whole ball in assembly. And I'll pop off the hose. And then I'll just get my handy dandy scoop. Move that out of the way. And just scoop out the dry grain. Now that I've got that all scooped over, I'm just going to take this kettle off and I'll remove the recirculation tube. I like these quick connector things because they're real cool to the touch. So even though the tube is hot or the valve is hot, these being silicone, it's just really easy to operate them without getting your fingers burnt. So I'll take that. And then it's just a matter of removing this hose. And I'll just set this over here. And then we're going to take off the kettle. So it's just lifting an empty kettle, simple as can be. I'll remove the adapter lid. And we're ready to do our boil. Now I've got a whirlpool fitting connected to this kettle. And then I can recirculate and whirlpool when we're at the end of the boil. So we've got the kettle removed and I'm checking the temperature of our boil and we're at about 185 degrees. So as you can see, plenty of time to get the grain out of there, get the kettle removed, and I'm going to go over and wash it. And I bet I'll be done cleaning that well before this is up to a boil. Cleaning the button loop or false bottom is really easy. The slots don't trap the grain bits like the perforated false bottoms do, and it's just a simple matter of just getting the sprayer or running it under the faucet. And there you have it. Another great feature I love about the Boilermaker G2 is the valve. It's so easy to take apart and clean. There's really only two parts to it. There's that part and the part that's connected, and you can just spray in there and give that a little soak, and your valve is clean and put together. And you can see here the taper, that's what gives it this real linear, super easy to adjust flow on this valve. So that's the end of our brew day, and hopefully we've answered a lot of questions that you may have had about the BrewEasy and can see how simple it is to use and the amazing quality wort and beer that you can create with it on top of all the extra features of the G2 kettle itself. And if you've got any other questions,
you can reach out to us on our webpage. Go up to the right-hand corner to the support tab, and we'd be happy to answer any questions or follow-up questions about the equipment that you have. Thank you.
cheers.
Cheers.